All right, I want to talk about New World versus Old World wines, and even ancient world wines, right? Ancient world is Greece, right? Cyprus here, pushing that boulder up a mountain. Yeah, the ancient world, Greece, the Middle East, it's where the wines really originated, and the amorphe, I think that's how you pronounce it, which is this clay pot that was used to store and transport wine way back in the ancient world. And it was used by the Roman Empire even when they were, expanding their empire. They would bring these amorphes filled with wine to the areas they were colonizing, that they were bringing into the Roman Empire. And then they would pay the soldiers with land. They wouldn't give them a pie, they wouldn't give them a bag of dirt. They would give them land, and they would end up, that maybe they'd plant vines and they'd start growing their own grapes and making wine. So that was how the ancient world kind of expanded out, and the grapes ended up growing and wine started getting made in the old world, which was, Europe, France, Spain, all that. Well, when the Roman Empire fell and they stopped having that expansion and the sharing of the wine and the amorphe, in the old world, they kind of started to just make wine for their little villages that they were living in. So it wasn't like it was a big commerce that was expansive and worldwide. It was really for their own area. And so the wines became very unique and local, and there was a lot of pride in the culture and, what the families passed down in order to make the wines. And then there was the transatlantic routes, right? The ships, the galleons that were going from Europe to the Americas to Africa, and the colonization that went along with that, right, of Europe, that went out to the New World, right, to these different continents. And when they went to the New World, again, brought their vines, right, started planting grapes, making their own wine, but because they now had the ships and this really great way to transport wine, they started marketing it all over the world again, right? It wasn't like when you made wine in Napa Valley, it wasn't just to be drank in Napa Valley. It was going out, wherever they could get people to buy it. So the New World wines are very much made for a global consumption, right? They're more intended to maybe not be drank with food, right? A lot of the old world wines they really pair well with the local cuisine, and sometimes they can be a little harsh on the palate if you're not pairing them with food. So, what I have here today, I have an old world, a Chablis, an old Chardonnay, and a New World Chardonnay. And there are significant differences in them. I mean, they're gonna have the same varietal fingerprint. However, for Chardonnay, there isn't really one, right? It doesn't have a lot on its own, which is why when it's blended with another type of wine or grape, it kind of gets overpowered by that varietal fingerprint. I really like this Chablis, though. It's light, it's got some minerality, some citrusness to it. It does not have that buttery aroma that the New World Chardonnay, this one in particular, is going to have. So it most likely didn't go through the malolactic fermentation, and that's another thing that really introduces the nuances to, how wines taste differently, even if it is the same grape. If there's one that's made in a different part of the world, depending on, again, the way it's produced or the fermentation it goes through, whether or not it goes through malolactic fermentation, but even if it does, those microbes are going to be different potentially. They could, have small genetic differences in different parts of the world, which would lend itself to different flavorings and aromas. And yep, I'm starting to get that warm butter. And I'm learning that when it comes for me to get a good sense of the aromas, I need my wine to warm up a little bit. I am terrible with, wine that's right out of the fridge or the wine cooler. I seem to have a hard time picking up on the nuances. But this definitely feels a little heavier in the body, maybe not as acidic. I'm surprised, I like the Chablis a lot. I never would have known that. So here is a Pinot Noir. This is the Old World, which is a Burgundy, and the New World, which I think is from William Nett in Oregon. Now, Pinot Noir, it doesn't have as heavy of that varietal fingerprint, but it's there. I'm getting the roses, the barnyard, but the barnyard isn't as heavy as sometimes it is in the New World ones. It's higher in acidity than a New World Pinot because the grapes most likely when they were harvested were greener. They weren't as ripe. The climate is different, right? When you get a Pinot, and granted in Oregon, it's not going to be like, you know, necessarily the heat of California desert, if you will, but it's still, like, they probably harvest them a little bit later. And you definitely you get the aromas of the ripe fruit, right? It's a little bit more fruity than an Old World, the Burgundy there. You definitely get the roses. Definitely the barnyard. It's not as acidic. And what I'm definitely getting is that I didn't get in the Old World is a smokiness. So when I exhale through my nose, I'm definitely getting that smoky aromas and flavors. And that indicates that it was aged in an oak barrel, a new oak barrel probably. A lot of times in the New World wines, they love to use new French oak barrels to age their wine. And that's going to add spice, it's going to add smokiness, and that is not going to be something you taste in an Old World Pinot. Anyway, I clearly have more tasting to do to make sure that I remember this. Cheers.